What's going on, guys? Boost Auto here. Today we're going to be showing you how to install a set of our Ion Series illuminated door handles. This procedure is going to apply to 2023 and newer model Ford Super Duties. With that said, let's get into it.
Introducing our new Ion Series light-up door handles by Boost Auto. Our door handles are direct OEM replacements, but we've turned the styling up to 11, with all the same lighting functions as our other Boost Auto products jam-packed into a factory-style door handle. Plus, the Ion Series handles can be built to have white or amber running light to fit right with any build. That paired with our startup sequence will turn your ride into a showstopper the second you turn the key. And of course, all Ion Series handles will come with turn signal as standard flashing signal or our premium sequential signal to ensure you stand out on the road. Don't let the night hold you back. Ion Series innovative technology ensures your vehicle stands out brighter and stronger than the rest. Plus, with a solid polymer construction and your choice of either universal black or OEM paint match, you can rest assured our Ion Series illuminated door handles will be tough and look good doing it. Wherever you stand with your build, take it to the next level with Ion Series illuminated door handles. A couple things to note before we get into the install. First, the procedure outline in this video is for 2023 and newer Ford Super Duty trucks. If your vehicle is a different year range, head on over to boostauto.com for the latest in fitment and availability and to purchase all we have to offer. Let's get into it. Before we get started, make sure all your windows are rolled up and your seats moved all the way forward. Then disconnect the negative terminal on your primary battery and secondary battery if you have one.
Starting on the passenger side, we're going to want to remove our door panel. So we're going to have to remove our sail panel trim. Guys, if you haven't already got a set of these Boost Auto trim tools, I really suggest it. They make life a whole lot easier.
Now remove the 7mm bolt underneath.
Now we're gonna get this trim piece below the door grab. So you're gonna wanna pop the top off first and then release the little tabs at the bottom.
Now remove the two 7mm bolts underneath.
For this little trim cover, you can just grab a little flat blade screwdriver and get in there and pry from the top and it'll pop right out.
Next, remove the three 7mm bolts around the outside of the door. Remove the door panel by releasing all the clips around the door, then pulling the door straight up and out.
First, we'll disconnect this lock rod. Just grab these little tabs here and pull down. Now for the door handle cable, there's a little tab at the bottom that you're just gonna wanna pull down on, and then this whole thing unlatches like so. Now we can disconnect any electrical connectors we have present.
Once everything is disconnected, repeat the same steps on the rear door.
With the door panel off, we can now begin with removing the speaker. So first, just unplug the electrical connector, and then there's four 7mm screws around it. Now there's just a little tab holding it on, so if you grab the top of it and pull out, then you can just remove it from the vehicle. Okay, now we can peel back our splash guard. Just work your way all the way around and then pull it completely off the door. And we'll set that aside.
If you have passive entry handles, unplug the passive entry connector. We will plug this connector back in after installing our Ion Series handles. If you don't have passive entry, this harness and connector might still be present. If this is the case, unplug the connector and we'll show you what to do with it later in the install.
All right, now we're gonna wanna remove this grommet that is hiding the 5mm bolt that we need to get to. To remove this handle, we're gonna simultaneously pull open the handle and just slowly loosen that bolt. The bolt's not gonna come out, but we just wanna loosen it till the handle pops out.
Just a quick note, we recommend using hand tools to remove and reinstall your door handles.
Okay, once that rear pops out, now we can come over to the front and just wiggle it out, pull it to the rear of the door, and that'll come unlatched. Once we remove our old handle, there is a metal tab in this hole here that we're gonna wanna wind back. Now, depending on how the old handle comes out, if that metal tab isn't already flush, we're just gonna wanna get back on that 5mm bolt and we're just gonna slowly loosen it, and you'll see that tab start to wind in. We just wanna bring it to where that tab is flush with the plastic. Like that there. Okay, with the old handle removed, we can now proceed with installing our Ion Series handle. So we're gonna take the electrical connector on the front and pop it through that front hole in the door. This is gonna latch in first and then just kind of turn the handle inward like that. With that back part popped in, now we can get back onto that 5mm bolt. And while we're kind of pushing on the handle, we're just gonna slowly tighten that bolt. The handle is gonna kind of slip back into place and it'll snap shut. Once it snaps shut, you just want to wind that 5mm bolt back down until it's just snug. Only use hand tools on this bolt. Once the Ion Series handle is installed, don't forget to pop this grommet back in.
We can now go back to the rear door and remove the speaker.
So you can start by disconnecting the electrical connector on the speaker. Just press the tab and pull it out. Then we can take out our 3 7mm bolts on the speaker. There's 2 little dowels that are kind of holding it in. One up there and one down below. Just be careful when you're pulling on the speaker, and it'll come out.
Then you can peel away the inner door liner and set it aside. You can now uninstall your factory handle and install your Ion Series handle by repeating the same steps as the front door.
Okay guys, now that our passenger side front and rear handles are installed, we can repeat all the same steps up until this point on the driver's side. Alright, so over here on the passenger side, to gain access to our BCM, there's a couple of trim panels that we're going to want to remove.
The BCM is located against the outside wall of the passenger footwell.
For the sill plate here, if we just get a firm grasp underneath it and pry up, it's just held in by trim clips, so that'll come right off. Okay, so the BCM access cover is just behind this kick plate here. You can see it, there's a little bezel here you can get your hand in, and then there's just one trim clip back there, and it pries out pretty easy. So for this kick plate here, we're just first gonna peel back some of our weather stripping, and then this upper panel here, if you peel that back just a little bit, that corner there, makes it a little easier to pry this kick panel back. So one trim clip up there. Before we start tapping wires at the BCM, we're going to want to grab our Ion Series module from our kit, along with the 4-pin harness and the 2-pin harness. And we're going to want to plug those into the module, and then we're going to place our module so that when we're grabbing our wires to tap, we cut them to the proper length. We're going to plug in our 4-pin harness here, push it in until it clicks. Then we can plug in our 2-pin harness. Now we'll proceed with mounting this in the truck. As for placing the Ion Series module, I like to just take it and stick it behind the heater box. Okay, so looking at the BCM here, the first connector we're going to be working with is going to be this large black connector with the white latch. So to unplug it, there's a little tab right here underneath the latch. You're just going to press on that and then delatch the connector, and you can pull it out. Now, to remove the connector shield, we're first going to want to cut this zip tie. You can remove that. Now there's going to be a little tab underneath the latch, so we're going to depress that, and then that connector shield should come up like so.
Before you start tapping, we recommend cutting back the tape on the harness to give yourself some extra space on the wires to tap and avoid the connector cover.
The first wire we're going to be tapping to is in pin 31. So if you're looking at the connector from the back side like this with the latch fully unlatched, it's going to be in the slot that is 4 from the right. So this wire right here. Before we place our T-tap, we want to make sure that we place it far enough up on the wire that that connector shield will be able to be reinstalled. Now we'll just grab our T-tap, place it around the wire, and then push it until it clicks, and use a pair of pliers to help do so. So now we're gonna take the red wire with green tracer from the 4-pin harness that's plugged into the Ion Series module. We're gonna measure it up to that T-tap, cut it to length, and we can strip the end of the wire and crimp on a single disconnect. With our disconnect crimped on, we can go ahead and plug that into the T-tap that was placed on pin 31.
The next wire we're going to is in pin 6. With the connector tab on the right, pin 6 is 6 slots from the right on the bottom row.
We'll grab our T-tap, loop it around the wire, and push it down until it clicks. Again, you can use a pair of pliers to help do so. Now you're going to want to take the red wire with blue tracer from the 4-pin harness on the Ion Series module, measure that up to length, cut it, and we'll strip the end and crimp on a single disconnect. Once your disconnect is crimped on, you can simply place that into the T-tap that we put on pin 6. This next wire, this is going to be if you optioned for running light. If you did not option for running light, you can take that orange wire that's coming off your 4-pin harness and just cut it and discard the wire. If you did option for running light, you're going to need to tap this wire.
We're going to be tapping to pin 11. With the white connector latch on the left, pin 11 will be the 4th pin from the right, 2nd row from the bottom.
So once we've located that wire, again, we're going to grab a T-tap, loop it around the wire, and then push it down till it clicks. Okay, once that T-tap is placed, we can grab the orange wire off of our 4-pin harness, measure it up to the T-tap, cut it to length, then we'll strip the end and crimp on a single disconnect. Once our disconnect is crimped on, we can go ahead and plug that into the T-tap that we placed on pin 11.
With all the tapping done on this connector, we can now reinstall the connector cover. Start by latching the bottom of the cover that is away from the white connector handle and then swing it upward toward the top and press it together until it clicks. Next, go ahead and replace the zip ties securing the connector cover.
As for plugging the connector back in, you're just going to want to sit it in there, and that white latch is going to come forward a little bit, and then you'll just grab it and latch it all the way down until it engages that little tab. Alright guys, now we're going to be working with the wires on the 2-pin harness connected to the Ion Series module. So first we're going to grab our black wire, and then we're going to be connecting it to this ground stud here. This ground stud is located just to the right hand side of the BCM. Just kind of measure it up to length, then cut it. We'll strip the end of the wire and we'll crimp on one of the included ring terminals. And then we'll place our ring terminal on the stud and reinstall the nut. So the last wire that we're going to need to tap is going to be the red wire coming off the 2-pin harness from the Ion Series module. Now this wire, actually, we're going to be tapping on the driver's side. So first what we're going to do is we're going to tape our wire to a straightened out metal piece, and we're going to pass the wire over to the driver's side underneath the dash behind the console. So we'll show you that now. Now that we have our red wire over to the driver's side, we're going to be tapping this wire to the OBD2 port that is right here. Now, to make things a little easier for tapping, we're going to disconnect the port from this metal cage that it's in. To do so, there's just little plastic tabs on each side. You can depress those tabs with a screwdriver, and the port should pop right out like that. As for the wire we will be tapping, the way that it was facing when it popped out of that metal cage, if we just turn it straight over like that, we're going to be working with the wire in pin 16, which is on the upper row, just this last pin all the way to the right. So this wire here. Now we can take a T-tap, wrap around that wire on pin 16, and then press it down till it clicks. With our T-tap placed, we can now take our red wire, measure it up to length, cut it, then we can strip the end of the red wire.
Now take the fuse from your kit and crimp it onto the red wire via the butt connector. Use a heat gun to shrink the butt connector. Strip back the other red wire on the fuse and crimp on a spade connector, then plug it into the T-tap.
Now we can simply take the OBD2 connector and push it back into its metal retainer. Once that wire's tapped, just make sure to take the rest of the slack on that wire and tie it up somewhere that it's not going to be in the way of the pedals or any other moving components.
Alright guys, now that the inputs to our Ion Series module are wired and tapped, we're going to move on to wiring the outputs. And that's going to be the actual handle harnesses going from the module to the handles themselves.
We're going to take the Ion Series module and plug these two door handle harnesses into the right-hand front and right-hand rear connectors.
With the right-hand harnesses plugged in, we can now begin disassembling the door jamb boot.
We're going to start by pulling the bottom half of the boot out into the door jamb.
Now we're going to have to release the door connector. So on this boot, there's going to be a tab here on the top, a tab in the middle here on both sides, as well as a tab at the bottom. So we're going to depress the top tab and begin to slide that connector out. Then depress the side tab, and with it out like that, we can work a pick around the back side to depress the tab on the back.
You can get to the back connector tab easier if you free up the rubber tabs on the boot cover.
Now we can disconnect the two connectors on the main door connector. So you just get a pick and depress that tab on the top. And there's going to be a tab on the same spot on the bottom for the other connector. With those disconnected, we can fish our boot and connector below this latch and pull it out. Now we can pull the rest of these tabs from the boot off the connector. Then the boot can come separate from the connector like that. If you have tape on the back side of the boot here, you'll just want to cut that back. That'll make it easier when we're fishing wires through there later.
We're now going to proceed with routing the wires through the hole in the cab, as well as the boot. The best way to do that is to grab a straightened out piece of metal, fish it through the hole in the cab, and then we can grab our right-hand front harness, tape it to the straightened out metal piece, and pull it back through.
When we bring the slack from the harness through the hole in the cab, make sure that we route it around the back side of this door hinge. Now we're going to take our straightened out piece of metal with the harness taped to it, and we're going to feed it first through the open slot in the door connector, and then begin feeding it through the door jamb boot. Once the metal piece starts to protrude out the backside of the door jamb boot, we can start feeding it into the hole in the door and continue feeding it through.
Once the straightened out metal piece is pulled all the way through, continue pulling some of the slack out of the harness.
With most of our slack pulled through the door, now we can start reconnecting our door connector and our boot. Once the boot is clipped around the edge of the connector, we can re-secure the little rubber tabs.
Then feed the boot back up under the door hinge and back into position. Now plug the two separate electrical connectors back into the main door connector.
With those plugged in, we can push the main connector back into the hole in the body. Make sure we don't pinch any of the wires on our door handle harness. Now we can re-secure the bottom side of the boot. Just push that back into the door.
Now with our boot refastened, we can continue to pull all of our slack through the boot and through the inside of the cab. And once we got all our slack out, we're gonna proceed with trying to follow this factory harness up to the back side of the door. And we wanna try and follow this factory harness as close as we can.
We're going to be securing the wires to the factory harness behind this rubber grommet. Now go ahead and feed the harness back into the door and down through the main opening so we can secure it to the factory harness. Now we can secure the ion handle harness to keep it away from the window track. Once the door handle harness is pulled through the main part of the door, we can continue routing it along the factory harness. Once the wires are secured to the factory harness, we need to install a few adhesive clips to help guide the wires around the window track. It's important you install the clips on the inner side of the door and the 90-degree edge where the door latch is mounted. Now go ahead and wipe down the inner door before placing the clips. Now install the clips, making sure to firmly stick them in place.
So now that we've got our harness all the way up to the end of the door here, we're gonna loop it around the back side of the window track. We wanna start on this side of it and end on that outside part of the door.
Once all the slack is pulled through and the wires are around the window track, you're going to continue running the wires behind the upper door support beam. Secure the wires into the clips and click them closed. Your harness should look like this when complete. Measure the door handle harness to length, giving yourself enough slack to reach the door handle, and cut the harness.
With our harness now cut to length, we're gonna go ahead and strip the ends of each wire. Now we can use a heat gun to shrink the heat shrink.
Now add a dab of dielectric grease to the connector and plug it into the door handle.
Now you might have two different scenarios. If you have passive entry handles, you're gonna take your passive entry harness connector and plug that into the handle.
If you don't have passive entry but still have this connector, go ahead and secure the connector with an adhesive clip.
Okay, now that our right-hand front harness is routed and connected to the door handle, we're gonna move on to the right-hand rear harness. So the first thing we're gonna do is peel up this rear sill plate. It's just held in by trim clips, so you can just pop that off. Then we're gonna peel back the weather stripping. You only have to peel it back up to where the bottom panel meets the top panel. Now we're gonna do the same thing with the weather stripping on the front of the B-pillar.
Depending on your vehicle, you will either have this seatbelt boot or a small bezel around the seatbelt. Pull them up before removing the B-pillar.
Now we can start disengaging the trim clips on the panel. So if you start at the top, just pull from behind it and then work your way around to the bottom. With the trim clips disengaged, you can guide the seatbelt through the hole at the bottom of the panel. Pull a little slack in the seat belt, and then you can set this to the side. At this point, we can take our right-hand rear harness and begin feeding it towards the rear door. So what I like to do is just take the harness and follow just the factory wiring back to that B-pillar. Once we get the harness closer to the B-pillar here, we can feed it underneath this seat belt tensioner and just feed all our slack through back towards that rear door.
Now that we've got our right rear harness at the rear door, we can start by disconnecting the door jamb boot connector.
So just press down on the top and then it'll simply pry out like that. Now we can disconnect the single connector. Now we can feed it below this hinge here, like that. Now we can release the bottom part of the boot. Now we can cut back the tape on the bottom of the boot here. Now we can release the door jamb boot from the connector.
to just relieve these rubber tabs, and then just peel it back from the connector. With our door connector and our door jamb boot undone, we can take our harness again, and on the inside of the vehicle, we can feed it through this hole here and out the opening in the B-pillar. Be sure to bring the harness on the inside of this hinge. Now we're gonna be running the harness through the door jamb boot, so we're first gonna tape the harness to a straightened out metal piece. Now we can take our straightened out metal piece and we're first gonna feed it through the open slot on the door connector and then through the door jamb boot. Once the metal piece starts protruding from the back side of the boot, we're gonna guide it through the hole in the door. Bring all your slack through into the door. Now we can reinstall our boot onto the door connector. Just work your way around the edge of the connector, the boot back on. You can re-engage those little rubber tabs.
Feed the boot back up into position, making sure to guide it under the hinge. Now plug the small connector back in. Guide the connector back into the hole, making sure not to pinch any wires, and click it back into place.
Now we can re-secure the grommet on the door jamb boot.
We can now secure the door handle harness to the factory harness running up the B pillar. Now pass the harness back through the speaker hole and out the main part of the door. We're going to be securing the wires to the factory harness behind this rubber grommet. Now we can secure the ion handle harness to keep it away from the window track. Once the door handle harness is pulled through the main part of the door, we can continue routing it along the factory harness.
So first, we're just gonna clean the surface we'll be sticking the clips to.
We can now place our adhesive clips on the inside of the door.
So just like the front, I'm just gonna twist the wire ends together, make a little hook to help it loop around the window track.
Once all the slack is pulled through and the wires are around the window track, you're going to continue running the wires behind the upper door support beam. With the harness secure, measure it to length with the connector on the handle and trim the access.
With our harness now cut to length, we're gonna go ahead and strip the ends of each wire. All right, with the wire ends stripped, just like the front, we can go ahead and grab another extension harness from our kit, and then we're gonna crimp each end of its respective wire onto the harness. With them all crimped on, we can use a heat gun to shrink the heat shrink.
Now add a dab of dielectric grease to the connector and plug it into the door handle. Clean the surface by the connector to attach one more adhesive clip. Now we can secure the ion handle harness to keep it away from the window track.
All right guys, now that our right-hand side harnesses are all situated, we're gonna be now working with the left-hand side.
Before plugging in your harnesses to your module and passing them over to the driver's side, you're going to want to be able to identify which harness is which. A simple way to do this is to tape an end of one of the harnesses and designate that the front or rear.
Now we're gonna plug our harnesses into the module. Again, they are labeled, so we're gonna plug the harness with the taped end into the left-hand front slot, and then the harness without the tape into the left-hand rear slot.
With both our harnesses plugged in, we can tape the ends to a straightened out piece of metal, and then we will proceed with feeding them underneath the dash to the driver's side. So with both our left-hand side harnesses now on the driver's side of the vehicle, we can just repeat all the same steps that we did on the passenger side. You'll just want to make sure that this wire that you have under the dash, you're just going to want to tie it up under the dash to existing harness and keep it out of the way of the brake and accelerator pedal. For reassembly, we can start with this lower B-pillar trim panel. Just guide the seat belt back through that hole on the bottom, and then we're going to want to situate it at the bottom first. Make sure it kind of clips into where it's supposed to go at the bottom. Then you can work your way around from the top, just re-engaging all those trim clips. Now we can put the seatbelt boot back in place. It just clips in the bottom. Now we can just feed the weather stripping back into place. Now we can reinstall our rear sill plate. Just pop that back in. And we can reinstall the weather stripping on the front side of the B-pillar.
To reinstall the kick panel, peel back the weather stripping, then the bottom corner of the side panel to get access to the topmost retaining clip. Next, clip the panel into place, working from the top to the bottom. Last, replace the weather stripping.
Now for this BCM cover, we're gonna wanna latch this side in first to the kick panel. And there's a little clip on the back side you'll engage. Now we can reinstall our front sill plate. Just clips into place.
Reinstall the front speaker by clipping it back into place, plugging in the connector, and replacing the 4 7mm bolts. Now, reinstall the door liner.
Now with our door panel, we can reinstall our lock rod. So that just push that up until it clicks. Now for the door handle cable, we're just gonna latch the top part in first and then push the bottom in until it clicks. Now we're gonna take the panel up, latch it into the top weather stripping. Then we can go around the sides and re-engage all the trim clips. Now we can reinstall these 2 7mm bolts underneath the door grab. We can reinstall the trim panel underneath the door grab. Reinstall the 7mm bolt underneath the sail panel. Reinstall the sail panel trim cover.
Next, reinstall the 3 7mm bolts around the outside of the door. And lastly, the corner reflector. You can now continue reassembling the rest of your door panels.
Now we can go ahead and reconnect the negative terminal on our battery. If you have an auxiliary battery, reconnect that at this time as well. All right guys, that is gonna conclude it for this install. As you can see, these handles look absolutely phenomenal. So if you wanna pick yourself up a set, head on over to boostautoparts.com today, and we will catch you guys in the next one.
The products shown in this video and so much more can be purchased on our website at boostauto.com. We're proud to offer a wide variety of products, parts, and accessories for your truck or SUV that will take your build to the next level. To watch videos like this one and to find out about our newest innovative products for your vehicle, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's all for now. We'll catch you in the next one.